This is Tyler, your antisocial critic and the host of the AntiSocial Network, your number one source for anachronistic conversations online. Come join us each week to hear opinions from some of the best voices discussing entertainment, politics, religion, and modern life on the internet today, most of which you've never heard of, but I have. This week on AntiSocial...
Yeah.
This week on AntiSocial...
I guess that's it. All right, good enough.
We're synced! This week on Antisocial Entertainment, we're joined once again by Late Night Gaming, our resident Halo expert. How's it going, man?
Hey, resident Halo expert.
That's
That's
title.
quite an honor. I don't know if I'm worthy of it. That's the game with the green stormtrooper, right? That's Halo?
Something like that. You need a little plaque over your door that just says, I am the Halo expert. I'm here to solve all your Halo needs."
Yeah, Halo. I'm quite familiar with him.
I know that guy. He's in that game I like.
Yeah. Yeah, Halo. That's the game with the giant circle, right?
It just rips off all these books like Ringworld and Starship Troopers and the Alien movies. It's just this kind of collage. There's not much to it, really.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting that Halo aped, like, a ton of stuff from different sci-fi, but it did it so charismatically that it kind of made it its own thing, to the point that there are some people who probably don't know Halo is aping off of a bunch of different science fiction.
Well, I'm a student of the school that says there's nothing new under the sun. So just the fact that it's taking all these elements is not necessarily the problem, because anyone who's ever worked at Bungie is like, oh yeah, we aped off Starship Troopers, we aped off the James Cameron, we aped off all this stuff. And it's obvious, too. It's not like there's plagiarizing any of those authors.
The game is not pretending it's being original.
Yeah, but I think what makes it work is that it finds something new to do within those stories. Like, there's nothing specifically thematically it really takes out of Ringworld or Starship Troopers. Like, it's not really an exploration of politics in the way Starship Troopers is, or it's not really about survival in the same way Ringworld is. It's kind of just doing this its own thing, and it's trying to be this kind of its own hero's journey narrative with its own takes on... I guess you could say it's kind of a post 9/11 exploration of radicalism in some ways, but there's a lot of readings on it, so it's not just.
Is it a hero's journey, Halo?
Marty O'Donnell actually talked about that a little in one of his recent interviews. He said that.
I know Marty.
Did you watch
any?
He
said that, but I don't know if he's correct.
Well. I don't know what the other people at Bungie said, but I was willing to take it at his word and just assume that there's something to be said for the fact that you're playing through a hero's journey where you don't necessarily have as much of an internal character journey as much as you do have an experience with the game. Which, if he's right in that kind of idea, it's interesting, but I don't know. It's not traditional in the same way that like a hero's journey novel might be.
It's interesting because, like, at least the Bungie games, there isn't a lot of separation between the character Master Chief and the player. So if it was a hero's journey, I'd believe it, but the hero is the actual player themselves.
Yeah.
Like, Chief isn't a very proactive character. He's usually responding to things that are happening around him, and that's because of, gameplay purposes. Like, Halo isn't an RPG. The player can't make their own choices. They're just reacting to the events of the narrative.
That's why Marty said in the interview, like, there's a reason the character in the game doesn't know anything more than the Master Chief, because the player playing is the one that's supposed to have all the realizations and come to the conclusions based on the way the game is presented. So it's a journey for the player as much as it's a journey for Chief.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's weird. And when you think about that, it's weird to square it with the books exactly, because the books are so thematically different than the games. It's hilarious. But I love the books, but they're such a different artistic animal than the games themselves. Which, speaking of which,
the whole concept of blue team, like, Chief isn't strong enough of a character to hold an entire novel on his own, so they just came up with 3 more Master Chiefs.
And they're actually, in some ways, they're all more interesting than Master Chief, because they all, other than Master Chief's quipping, they all have a little more personality to them right from the get-go.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you what Chief's favorite color is. I don't even know what his favorite food is.
I assume he just eats, like, paste. I think he probably just does it for his, like, food intake necessary. No flavor is unnecessary. But
yeah, energy levels low, nutrition bar, consume.
Well, speaking of the books, I don't want to bury the lead too much, but obviously a lot has happened in the last 6 or however many months since we did the last, since our stream around the reveal. I mean, the game obviously got delayed indefinitely, and we don't know when it's coming out now, but the book that was supposed to serve as its prologue is now out, and we can talk about that. So, So, have you? I read it roughly within a week of when it came out. Have you? When did you finish it?
I have not finished it yet, surprisingly. But
Really?
it's
Okay.
okay. I don't care about spoilers. In some cases, I think spoilers can enhance
Okay. So
my reading experience.
Okay. Well, I'll just say off the bat, they don't end up revealing as much as you think they would by the end of the book. So.
Oh yeah, they can't.
Yeah, and I don't know what I was expecting, because the hook of the book seemed to suggest that they were going to kind of offer like a few nuggets of story details going into Halo Infinite, but they don't really pull the trigger on it. They just ends up kind of being a self-contained story about Blue Team going back to Reach and kind of reminiscing and hanging out with the locals, more than it does end up being kind of the first chapter of Halo Infinite. They don't even really pull the trigger on what the big reveal in Halsey's basement is.
Yeah, I mean they can't, because there's gonna be Halo Infinite is acting as a soft reboot for the
Yeah.
Right off the bat, something that does worry me is the community is going into Halo Infinite like, all right, Halo 6, the big conclusion to the story. It's like, no, guys, they've been very clear that this is a soft reboot. This is not the conclusion, all right?
That's gonna...
Don't go in expecting that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see how that actually ends up.
This is the start of a new story, and we need to approach it that way. So it makes sense that the book wouldn't want to do that, because, like, if Halo Infinite is the new start of this, like, conflict, whatever it's going to be, like, yeah, the book's not gonna be the first chapter of that, because you've got, like, 12-year-old kids who play Fortnite that 343's trying to court. You know, we're trying to introduce a new generation of players to the Halo series. It's been half a decade since the last mainline Halo game.
Well, yeah,
entire kids have grown up.
They made that mistake initially when they started working on Halo 4 and 5. Is like, oh, we're gonna weave the plot into the books, and then they realized too late that the books are read by a minuscule faction of the fan base, and suddenly all the people are like, wait, who is the didact, and what is happening?
What's a didact? A mantle of what?
Librarian? What is this?
Librarian who?
Ancient Human Wars?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I don't blame anyone that doesn't want to read a book 3 times longer than the Silmarillion to understand the plot of this video game, but I'm not that it's a bad thing, but I'm glad they are trying to weave it into it, but...
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. It's just a misunderstanding of what the target audience is.
Mm-hmm. So I was wondering if the book would have much of an introduction, but I guess it ends up just being kind of more of a setting the stage story more than anything else. I mean, it takes place about...
Yeah, a little bit of world building here and there, a little bit of, like, letting us know what the state of the universe is.
Yeah, I mean, there's... obviously the big reveal towards the end of the book is that Atriox comes back, but that's not the most surprising thing. It's just weird given what we already know about Halo Infinite and Halo Wars 2. But have you how far are you into the book?
I'm still within the first quarter, I want to say.
Okay.
But I've read enough online to where I feel comfortable talking about other aspects of it, like where it goes.
All right, well, Atriox comes back, but he's like the only one that comes back, and some of the
Okay, so they got squashed on the Ark by the Spirit of Fire?
No, the war with the Spirit of Fire still seems to be ongoing by the end of the book.
Okay.
And they do send some elite reinforcements to the Ark, but that's really all that happens. Like there's no scene where it's like Atriox comes out and he's like, I have crushed the enemy. Or there's no scene where like the Spirit of Fire suddenly just comes out of nowhere in slip space and suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, the Spirit of Fire is still around. What is happening right now? There's nothing crazy like that. But the Atriox just comes out of the portal and he's like, I am alive. I left everyone else behind. I'm going to join the plot of Halo Infinite now. And
I will see you all in 2021.
Which, that's a weird reveal, given that it's kind of sort of implied that at the beginning of the Halo Infinite trailer that Atriox is now involved in the plot. So
yeah, it makes you wonder what happens in Halo Infinite.
Yeah, I mean,
is cool.
I guess it's possible that Atriox dies in the opening scene, or maybe that that scene was just kind of fabricated for us, so we didn't see that Atriox was going to be the main villain or something. But
or it's entirely possible that it's like, confusion seems to be one of the underlying things pinning Halo Infinite. Nobody knows exactly what happened. What destroyed the Ark. Even Chief doesn't seem to know what happened.
Yeah, I mean, it would...
Yeah, everybody just seems very scattered. Almost like you're picking up the pieces as you go, trying to figure out what exactly happened, what destroyed the ring and everything.
Yeah, I guess it's implied at the beginning of... during the book that the human forces that we're going to see at the beginning of Infinite are basically just the Infinity and a few other ships, so it's not like it's the entire human fleet's going to be sitting over the Halo ring. It's going to be destroyed. It's probably just, they had the Infinity, they had a couple support ships, and then they picked a fight with the Banished, and the Banished just clobbered them probably. And
yeah, it's really similar actually, setting wise, to Combat Evolved. The idea of this one human ship that's kind of the last big one fighting against an oppressive force.
Yeah, that makes sense in terms of them wanting to do soft reboot as well. We're just going to reset the status quo to kind of sort of be like the way it was before, but different.
And even thematically, I almost think it fits. And I don't know how intentional this was, but with Halo 4, the Reclaimer saga, you've got this theme of the mantle of responsibility, like all the species of the galaxy fighting for control of Forerunner technology so that they can be like the dominant species and stuff like that. And just like the Forerunner Empire, it led to total collapse. Galactic-wide collapse.
Yeah, and I'm curious if they'd actually would pull the trigger on Master Chief, like becoming the keeper of the mantle or something like that, but I have...
Oh no, I completely, if I can interrupt for a second.
Oh yeah, sure.
I completely disagree. And the reason why is I think this is an interesting direction. They might be going in the direction of finally acknowledging that the mantle of responsibility itself is problematic. Like, as a concept, nobody should be the protector of everyone else. Nobody should play God.
I could see that definitely being the approach. I mean, if especially...
this is now the second galactic collapse to happen. It started with the Forerunners thousands of years ago. Now the UNSC collapsed. Like, the mantle does this. It's a cycle.
Yeah. And I mean, they talk about that a little in Halo 5, where they imply that Master Chief is really unsettled by the idea of one individual being like Cortana having that much power and that much control over the universe. And
yeah,
I don't know how much the creators are ultimately going to play into the plot of Halo Infinite, but that seems to be at least in terms of the setting. That's, I would imagine,
they're definitely, they're gonna be part of it. To what extent? I almost wonder if they're gonna like downplay the created. Like, maybe it's not as big as Halo 5 made it seem. Like, maybe they're gonna downscale it to more of a civil war within the UNSC.
Well, there's some dialogue in the book that makes it sound like Cortana has basically got like the entire her entire corner of the galaxy sound tapped. Like anywhere that
Gotcha.
has anywhere that has or has had satellites in it, she's figured out how to ping signals off of them. That way, she can kind of sense anytime any sort of major fights going on in a former humanly controlled system, and it's basically given her the ability to listen in on large sections of the galaxy at once. Although it's not clear what parts of the galaxy she doesn't have control over in the book.
Yeah, they're being a little bit more vague about that, which, granted, I do appreciate. I like that there's weaknesses. You know, because Halo 5 made it seem like, well, I guess this is game over. I don't care. And now it's a little bit more interesting that it's not complete domination. There's a bit of a struggle for control going on.
Yeah, and I think the Banished definitely help, because at the end of Halo 5, the story felt so almost barren. Like, all the factions seemed like they kind of had their stories wrapped up in a nice clean bow. Like, oh, the Covenant's gone. Oh, the UNSC is gone. Like, at that point, what do you do at that point? So I think
you're fighting robots.
yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah, the enemy faction that no one particularly likes, even people that like these games, don't particularly like the Forerunner factions, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
But I mean, bringing back the brutes is smart either way.
Yeah, even just like it's kind of interesting because the brutes are like a species with no culture, essentially. And the reason I say that is because they gave themselves so completely to the prophets. Like, the elites always had kind of one foot out the door, you know, still clinging on a bit to their own heritage. But the brutes gave themselves completely and totally over to the prophets. So the collapse of the Covenant means now that the brutes don't have a culture anymore. They're just pointless. I mean, we didn't even see them in Halo 4 and 5. Like, that's how directionless and aimless brutes are as a species. So it's cool that Atriox is now this like rallying cry to the entire galaxy for the brutes.
Yeah, the book kind of makes it seem like there's some ongoing disagreement still within the brutes as to what degree they should still be upkeeping the Covenant. Like, it's in Halo Wars, I got the sense that I haven't beaten Halo Wars, but I get the sense that Atriox's deal was that he was essentially the anti-Covenant, which is you have this giant conglomeration of aliens, but they aren't driven by a religious code so much as they're just drawn together by this sense of brotherhood and a desire to be powerful outside of the realm of the Covenant. And the book makes it sound like there's still a bunch of factions under his control that think the Great Journey is legit, and I don't know how I guess there could still be some Covenant factions that still have some attachment to the Great Journey concept, and that we saw a couple of them in Halo 4 and 5, but I can't imagine how many of the brutes. Well, actually, there probably would be a lot of brutes that still have it, but it's hard to tell what the actual ideology of the Banished is going to be at this point.
Yeah, that's basically what we're waiting on now. We've got a motivation for the formation of the Banished, but we don't know what they want.
Yeah, that's been kind of concerning for me, just because the idea is really cool, but they don't really have an innate reason to hate humans. In fact, they don't hate humans. Like, there are humans working for the Banished in the book, so I don't exactly know what they need a massive impetus for why they should be fighting them. And even in the book, it's weird, because, like, Master Chief sees the brutes and he just immediately starts fighting them. And did you just unintentionally declare war with the Banished, Chief? Like, were you not at war with them up until now, and then now you're suddenly at war with them? Like, it's...
Well, from what I had read in the books, the brutes were already acting pretty hostile.
Weren't there brutes that were hanging out with, like, insurrectionists in the colonies, though? Like, it seemed like the brutes didn't seem to have a line about what they thought about humans, at least after the war.
I think it's less about humanity and it's more about specifically the UNSC.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I can definitely see why they'd hate the UNSC.
Yeah, like that specific. Like, it's the term humanity is. I almost wonder if like the Halo universe or the writers use a different interpretation of that term, Like, it seems whenever, like, anything declares war against humanity or something, they're kind of referring to the good guys, which is the UNSC. Like, insurrectionists are almost their own thing now.
Yeah, they're off on their own. Did you read Bad Blood? Which
I did read. I think New Blood I had read. Bad Blood, unfortunately, I kind of gave up on.
Really? You didn't like that one?
No, I wasn't. I wanted a sequel to New Blood, and what I got was kind of not that.
I mean, it kind of turns into that towards the end, especially. I mean, do you know what ends up? Do you know what happens in it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think bringing Dutch back was a little iffy, but I mean, by the end of it, they've basically resurrected Alpha 9. So
yeah, it was I guess I was kind of like, I don't know. I felt like that book, it couldn't quite decide if it wanted to be like a sequel to New Blood or a kind of like a clarification to the community of what the state of the universe was. Like, some of that stuff I thought was the worst part. You know, everyone liked the sequence when Chief was like hanging out with the Arbiter and they were all feasting on St. Helios and Victory, and I'm like, I don't like this. This doesn't feel like the sequel to New Blood I wanted. This feels like the sequel to Halo 5. Like, get back to the New Blood stuff.
Yeah, but the Master Chief just completely drops out of the narrative by, like, Chapter 3 or so.
Oh yeah, he's gone. Same with Locke, same with Osiris.
Well, Locke shows up at the very, very end just to kind of say hi to, hi to Buck and introduce himself to Alpha 9, but that's about all we see of him.
Yeah, he came to validate Alpha 9. He's like, hello, I am one of the main characters of Halo. I approve of you. You all are cool dudes. Bye.
Hi, I'm Halo Man. How are you?
Hi, I'm a Halo Man.
I'm surprised they even bothered at that point, but I guess they kind of had to lampshade it. This is the end of Locke's arc. He's drinking on the Infinity for the rest of the story. We don't need to address him for the rest of the games.
Good old Spartan Locke.
I always thought he was conceptually good.
Oh yeah,
but it's never really filled his character out in something that would actually be cool or functional in any way.
Conceptually, you got a lot there that you can work with. Why didn't you? And why don't you?
They let the guy who wrote Spartan Ops write Halo 5, and he doesn't know how to write.
Yeah.
I don't even know what his name is. I just know him as the guy who wrote Spartan Ops.
Oh, Brian Reed?
That was him? Okay.
To be fair, though, also with Halo 5, I wonder how much of some of the writing issues are down to, like, their bizarre narrative choice. Like, I read somewhere that there was a deliberate direction they wanted to take the dialogue and cutscenes in, and it was because you're going to have 4 people in a party, most times, like, yelling and screaming at each other. So the cutscenes and the dialogue were almost used to explain why you were in a place. You know, it was almost treated like a co-op game. Like, there's 4 players at any given time, so cutscenes are just justification for why you're in the level.
I could see that
being... You know what? When you put it that way, I see it.
I could see that being one of Microsoft's decisions, because there were a lot of parts of that game that were clearly top-down decisions, like making it rated T and stuff like that, where it's clear it wasn't for the art of the game. It was just, oh, we have to do this, oh, we have to do that, oh, use this, use that. Just we have to dot all the I's and strike the T's and all that stuff, and make it so that it's got to be our new next gen launch game. So
there was a lot of that, like, trend chasing.
Yeah, and obviously they cut off co-op too, just because they wanted to sell like 1,000 Xbox Ones. And
that's a conspiracy theory I think doesn't hold a lot of validity just to how games are developed.
You don't think that was the case?
No, my personal theory is that it was more so a sacrifice due to time constraints. Like, the fact Halo 5 launched with so little content, I think actually just furthers the theory that I bet they actually did this because of time constraints. They couldn't even get infection in the game, like a game mode, where you kill a guy and that guy switches to your team. I'm willing to bet split screen was a sacrifice due to time constraints. Like, we got split screen working, but it runs terribly. Do we want to divert 4 months to optimization? But like this level in Sang Helios isn't working. Fuck it. Cut split screen. Get all the resources we had on split screen over to finishing up the game. Oh my god, we gotta launch this game in 6 months.
I could believe that. That sounds like it's not outside of their own possibility. But it does look fishy because it is the only time in the series where they haven't done co-op. It's like, oh, we're gonna just start abandoning basic features now because we don't have time.
It's also the first game in the series to ever target 60 frames per second, as well as target it on a new console generation. Like, that's part of why I think split screen was axed. Because they needed to prioritize. Like, the game was barely holding itself together. There was no content at launch.
Was it you or someone else that pointed out that they cut a lot of their effects graphics between the premiere trailer and the actual launch?
Oh yeah, looking at some of the trailers before launch and then the final game, and it's like, wow, those particle effects have been toned down.
Just imagine the Xbox One just dying with all those particle effects. Why are you doing this?
Yeah, even like the shading system, like the shadowing system looked so much worse in the final game than it did compared to the beta.
Wow,
Yeah, I think there was a mad scramble to prioritize what was more important, like getting the game actually running or getting it to be very buggy and very inconsistent, but hey, at least there's frame rate. Or split screen, I mean. Sure.
So, has there been much of an update on Halo since the official delay back in September?
No. We just got word that Joe Staten is now in charge of the campaign with Pierre Heinz, who is kind of responsible for heading the Master Chief Collection Restoration Project, now in charge of the multiplayer.
Okay. I heard they lost their team leader, which I heard part of that was just because he didn't fulfill his contract. So like, oh, you didn't get the game on launch day. You're cutting you loose. But I wasn't sure what the status of things was. I mean, I'd heard people say it could be as long as another year before the game comes out, which...
Yeah, at that point, it's all rumors. Like, publicly, all we know is that he was asked to step down, and then Microsoft brought in Joe Staten to assume campaign creative control. But looking at Joe Staten's track record... Obviously, everyone knows him as the Bungie writer guy, so there are assumptions that the story is being rewritten. I don't believe that because of his track record at Microsoft specifically. So at Microsoft, Joe Staten he's kind of like a fixer, basically. He bounces around from Microsoft Studio to Microsoft Studio, getting troubled projects into the final stages of development and then out the door. He helped with that one narrative game, Tell Me Why. He did work on Sea of Thieves. He did work on Crackdown. So yeah, he bounces around to projects that are just lagging behind and not meeting deadlines, and then is like, all right, you prioritize this, divert resources to this feature. All right, guys, we're gold. Let's ship the game. Bye, I'm on to my next project.
I'm just kind of imagining him running around like what's his name in The Big Lebowski. This is what happens when you have a stranger in the...
Yeah, kind of.
break the legs that need to get broken until the game gets out on time and functional.
Yeah, that seems to be his role. So I don't believe that the narrative is being rewritten. That's not realistic. Like, the game's been cooking in the oven for a very long time. You can't just uncook the narrative. So I'd imagine that's what they have him in there for. Halo Infinite must have just been missing its deadlines, and Chris Lee wasn't like the right leader to get the game out the door. I mean, I don't know. Even I'm just speculating now. We don't know anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's the conservative option, and the cataclysmic option is the game is completely inoperable and he ruined it and they have to start from scratch, which that's the the other extreme of the assumption. I just think that the not hitting the deadlines is probably the more sensible one.
Yeah. Yeah, because what we saw was concrete and tangible.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like Anthem where there was like a vague, we didn't even know what the game was after they revealed it. Like in Halo Infinite, there was concrete details. And then even afterwards, like a lot of us content creators were allowed to talk to the people at 343 and they gave us more details. Like, it's not an open world game. It is a linear game, but the levels are so large that some of them feel open world-y.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, there's details about the game. They're not being vague and hiding stuff.
No, it definitely felt like especially when we talked about when that launch trailer happened, it definitely felt like the game was playable at the time. Like, I almost thought they were gonna put like the demo out on the Xbox and just let people play it and get their hands on it and see how it felt, but they didn't end up doing that. Although I think that might have assuaged some of the anxiety, but it's...
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just imagine if they did and people actually got to kind of get a sense of what the feel is and see how it actually flowed. I think that probably would have gone a long way to making people feel better about the launch. But I don't know.
The uncomfortable silence now is getting worrying.
Yeah, I mean, it was bad in the spring when it was like, oh, the game's probably going to come out for the console launch, but the trickle is just nothing again. I mean, like, I'm starting to see like posters and stuff show up at like dollar stores and stuff, so I know they're starting to kind of roll out the marketing campaign, but it's very early. It's like, oh, you can buy your Halo Infinite poster at $5 below so you can have it on your wall when the game comes out eventually. I'm like, okay, but that's really just kind of like the minimal on the ground stuff you got to do. You got to get all the toys out to Walmart so that the kids can get really excited when the game actually comes out. But
somebody had pointed out on the Halo subreddit. So did you see the campaign trailer? Like, not the demo, but the trailer? There was like a battle rifle briefly in it.
Yeah, that came out like a couple hours after the actual reveal.
People pointed out that trailer was the same hill from the demo, just from different angles. Like, and what they revealed was just stuff from Discover Hope, the first cutscene of the game, and then Chief running around environments from that same demo. There was nothing else, no other biomes or anything. So there was somebody on the Halo subreddit 2 days ago that had a theory that the delay might have been coming regardless because of the fact that their big trailer for the campaign had one playable environment in it.
Yeah.
Like, that's all they had.
That's certainly possible. I mean, you'd think they would be showing off more. Like, even like the Halo 4 trailer showed more than one environment, but that could just be because they're playing their cards very close to the chest and they don't want anything getting out.
Yeah, probably.
Although it is frustrating, though, just because, like, you gotta get something to us. We're all starving, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of it is locked into those brand deals, like Butterfingers and Pepsi or whatever.
Yeah, that could probably be why a lot of the stuff's already starting to come out already, just because they need it.
I'd imagine that's why. Like, the marketing campaign wasn't delayed, the game was.
Yeah, and all the people that have licenses are like, well, we gotta release our toys, so you're not just gonna sit around all day and wait, and yeah.
We printed 50 million tin cans of Mountain Dew with Chief's face on it. We're not gonna let these sit in a warehouse. Like, they gotta get them out to stores. Like, that shit goes bad after a while.
Yeah. Funny enough, the local 5 and Below near me, which is they get like huge shipments of like overstock from major companies. They had like a dozen Sergeant Johnson Pop Funko bobbleheads. I don't know why. Nothing else. Just Sergeant Johnson. So
they're trying to fill the market. There's a big demand for Sergeant Johnson Funko Pops.
Well, I bought one, but I'm me, so I can't really speak for the rest of the market. But I don't know. At this point, I'm curious when they're actually gonna start muttering again when they want to release it, because I'd like it if it came out in like the spring, so we don't have to wait forever, even if they just released it in parts. Like, it's like, oh, we're launching the multiplayer, you can play it for free, and then we'll launch the campaign, and you can pay for the actual disc, and... Like, even if they started doing that, I think people would be at least moderately assuaged. Do you think they're going to do flighting now that they're...
reassurance.
What's that?
I think people just need reassurance. Like, what we saw was so rough, technically. Like, usually gameplay demos are good at faking. You know? They're usually very polished and stuff, and it's because it's all fake. Like, it's all scripted and stuff. Like, the developers essentially created playable CGI.
And they didn't hear.
What we saw was so technically rough that like the game probably is still in development. They probably revealed it too early.
That's a weird thought. I mean, after as much time as they've taken on that.
Yeah, they probably need more time making the game. They probably revealed it way too early.
What do you think then? Is this like, you think that's a late 2021 thing, or do you think they possibly go to like 2022? Like,
I have no clue.
I mean,
I have no clue. That's what's so frustrating.
It's anyone's guess.
Talk to us. Communicate.
Someone needs to say something.
What's the state of the game? What's going on, guys? Because, like, what you showed looked really rough. Does the game need more time? It's okay if it does. Just tell us something. Stop being so quiet.
You know, no one was mad at Nintendo when they said that they were starting Metroid Prime 4 from scratch. Everyone's just like, okay.
Yeah, people just want a good game.
Yeah, people will wait if you're upfront with about the problems like that. They just don't like to be held, like, in waiting for 8 years. Like,
yeah, games are magical, but we also understand that they're made by people. And if those people need more time to make the game, that's okay. Just let us know.
Yeah, good grief. So, did you have any other thoughts specifically on Shadows of Reach then, from what you've read so far, or what you think, or anything that's popped out about it?
It's not necessarily a narrative thing, although it is interesting some of the stuff that they're doing with different Covenant splinter groups. Like, the Banished seem to be just, like, eating up Covenant remnants that don't really have a direction or a goal.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of cool and interesting, but I don't know if maybe I have an issue with Troy Denning as a writer, but I kept getting distracted reading the book. And this happened in Silent Storm, the Master Chief book as well by him. It kind of almost reminds me of a science fiction version of Tom Clancy, where he gets very fixated on the mechanical details of crafts or weapons or something, or patterns, to the point that, like, entire, like, sections of a chapter, like, the tension rides on a specific tactical formation that the enemy has assembled themselves into. It's like, oh no, they've taken that position. That means that they're at this specific tactical advantage. We've got T-minus 30 seconds. And it's like, I start to get distracted because it's just so much information, you know?
Yeah, and I listen
like, my mind starts to wander. I have to reread a couple of paragraphs just because it's like info dumping tactical and mechanical information on me.
I mean, I listened to it on Audible, and there were times where I was just glazing over because I'm like, okay, move on. Get to the point.
Yes, I get it. The Seraphs, they're riding in this specific formation. That's why it's dangerous. Oh my God! Like, just come on, get the chapter over with. This is now the second Troy Denning book that I've had this issue with, so I'm starting to wonder if maybe it's not me.
I haven't read the other Troy Denning books, although a lot of the Halo YouTubers I've listened to really seem to kind of like this book, and
yeah,
I don't know. Like, my only problem with it is that the book is just like a 400 pages of blue balls. Like, there's once they meet the insurrectionists, the plot just grinds to a halt for specifically Blue Team, because suddenly they get wrapped up in the story of, oh, we gotta help these the natives fight back against the Banished and protect their homes. Otherwise, the colony is going to be destroyed. And yeah, okay, that's nice, but this is like 1 or 2 chapters worth of material, and instead it goes on for like half the book. And
yeah, Halo's in that uncomfortable position where, unfortunately, the state of the galaxy is something we're more interested in, like what's going on. So it's hard to have those small stories in it, because you're just like, okay, can we get this over with? What the hell is going on?
That, or make it a little bit more vibrant, like just it's like have the people like, oh, we're gonna have them tour us across the planet and show us where all the hidden caves are so that they can hide us, and that way we don't have to go through the open, which kind of seemed like it was what it was going for at first. Just the idea that, oh, these people they know how to dig underground, they know where to hide from the banished, but then it just turns into, oh, they want to siege their old base, and they want to launch a nuke, and we have to convince them not to launch a nuke, because if we do, Cortana's going to notice a nuclear explosion and the entire mission's going to go up in smoke. But yeah, I mean,
yeah, it's there needs to be, like, I'm looking forward to Halo Infinite for another reason other than just it being a Halo game, so that we can get the state of the galaxy settled. That way smaller stories don't have that, like, looming thing over them, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you can make a looming threat like the created work. I just don't think they figured out how to do it. I think they just, either they've written themselves into a hole where they don't know how to work out of it, or they haven't tried very hard. I mean, there are certainly ways you can write stories about being on the run from an all-powerful force. It's been done.
I should clarify. What I mean isn't how are they going to get out of the story. What I mean is whatever story they're going to try to tell is overshadowed by the galactic conflict. We're more interested in that right now. Not necessarily because it's good, but because we want to know how it's going to end or what the state of the galaxy is.
Yeah, I could see that.
Like, telling this small story about a resistance group on the planet Reach fighting, we don't care. There's Guardians flying around in outer space.
Yeah, that makes it it's challenging, especially in this one, just the way they handle it too. Like, I mean,
the book is a little bit plodding on top of that.
It is, and it would be easier if the book had more going on for it than just Reach. But the entire story, it begins with them going down to Reach and ends with them leaving Reach. Like, that you can tell that they only wanted to put, like, a very narrow focus on the universe with this book, and just kind of find a way to relay this the world building details on the sides of the story and not through the actual narrative, which it's disappointing. But
an interesting experiment, since this is kind of like, wasn't it pitched as a kind of successor to The Fall of Reach?
Yeah, a lot of people are saying it's either a direct or an indirect sequel to it, and there's a lot of elements that directly call back to Fall of Reach, and especially in the dialogue where they just kind of offhandedly mention, oh, where we were at that point in the book, where we were at that point in the book. There's a lot of discussions of just kind of what the setting has changed since that book, and some of the more interesting stuff for me is just the way it's integrating kind of every version of Halo. I mean, like, they even bring up Noble Team, which is interesting because this is the only time in the extended canon that they've ever even referenced it outside of that one game, which they kind of desperately need to reference Noble Team because we don't have anything about their backstory outside of that game. But
it might be as like an experiment. I wonder how the book would feel if you read Fall of Reach and then Shadows of Reach back to back.
It might be interesting, but Fall of Reach is a fairly vibrant book. It changes setting and what's happening constantly. I mean, it'll go from space fights to training on the ground in boot camp, and it's not just set in one location. It jumps around rather quickly. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, more is there narrative thematic connective tissue between the two stories?
Possibly. It feels really underwritten if that's the case, because a lot of it just comes down to the way the characters just kind of reflect on the way Reach has changed as an environment and reflect on how much has changed since they left it. And I mean, I think that's officially the first time Master Chief has banged back to Reach since its destruction. So there's a couple lines where he's melancholy about it, and he's like, "Oh, this used to be my home," stuff like that. Like, but I don't know if there's necessarily a point where it goes into full thematic retelling or thematic commentary. Although there is a weird cameo towards the end of the book that's, I don't know if you've heard of this one. I won't say it because it's kind of out of nowhere, and I don't think it's necessarily leading anything, but there's a very unique cameo towards the end of the book from I guess it would be a minor character who's mentioned in Fall of Reach, but I don't remember exactly where this character was mentioned.
Which character?
And it's mute. Anyone who doesn't want to hear can mute her right now, but Cortana's sister.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, they go back to Halsey's office, and somehow one of her subroutines is still active there. And they're like,
that's interesting.
What the heck? Cortana's sister's still alive? And like, oh, that's weird. But
that's what the theory was, that they were going back for like a data fragment or something, just because Chief's got that chip in Discover Hope.
Well, the way it sounds,
but it's not just a data fragment; it's like an actual AI.
Well, they don't retrieve her. That's the thing. It's a subroutine, so they just leave it and talk with it a couple times. But it sounds like what they're retrieving is like some sort of cases filled with frozen organs. At least that's what it sounds like. They don't actually say what it is, what the package is, but it makes it sound like they're like retrieving like cloned brain tissue or something. So maybe they are doing the Cortana clone idea. But
yeah, Cortana wasn't like developed like a computer. You know, she wasn't like a neural net that was developed on a computer. Like she was constructed from brain tissue.
Yeah. So
that's interesting.
I mean, so that's might be what it is, but they're playing so coy with it. I don't know if they're going to commit to that. And honestly, I don't know how I feel about the idea of a Cortana clone. That sounds like it. I don't know. That sounds a little gimmicky. Like I don't know. I don't know how you weave that into a story in a way that's authentic or actually says something about Master Chief as a character. Especially since he has such a complex relationship with the original Cortana. Like, bringing a Cortana into the existence that doesn't have their years of memories, that just feels like a mine shaft of implications right there. So much they need to bring up, and I don't know if the game's going to have the time to do that.
It would be interesting then if... So, you are actually right in that we've seen the whole clone of a character, like... The way that you fix a character everyone really likes becoming evil is make an exact duplicate of that character, and then it's like you just reset everything, you know? Like, we've seen that lazy storytelling happen before, but there is also... If they do want to do the clone Cortana route, that could be interesting, because Chief does have such a complex relationship. So having, like, a fresh slate that is a new character, like, that could be pretty haunting.
Yeah, it would
if they want to go that route.
It would have to be something they really commit to. Like I could.
Yeah, they'd have to do it well. They can't just say like, "All right, guys, like, look, Cortana's back."
If it were me, I would say that what they ought to do would be to create some sort of like, oh, we're going to use her brain tissue to create a matrix that when Cortana's placed into it, it'll reset her mind, but keep her memories. That she basically returns back to her normal self, but she's still herself in some way. Like, maybe they could do something like that where it's just they're going to try to capture her and reset the original Cortana, which I think...
Yeah, because wasn't the chip Chief had in Discover Hope, it was called, like, Spider or something like that? Like, implying that they had modified the Cortana chip into some kind of booby trap?
That's what people are saying. Like, it sounds like what's going to happen is that Master Chief's going to confront Cortana at some point, capture her inside his suit, and then do something else. But it's not clear. But I would say that's probably the better alternative than the full, we're going to make another Cortana and just completely wash that entire relationship down the toilet just for the sake of convenience.
Yeah, we have an unevil Cortana clone.
Oh my gosh. We're gonna have them get into a fist fight. They're both gonna have solid statues, and they're gonna have evil Cortana fight not evil Cortana, like at the end of Halo 4.
It's gonna be like Dragon Ball Z. They're gonna shoot lasers at each other. Evil Cortana versus good Cortana.
Oh, that sounds so awful. I really hope they don't do something that dumb. But
I hope they don't either. Because that would be apocalyptically bad.
Anyway, do you have any other thoughts on the book or the game at the moment, or?
No, that's about it.
All right, and hopefully we'll actually get some news soon. But it was nice talking with you again. I mean, it's getting frustrating not hearing anything, but it's good to talk things over.
Hopefully next time we talk, we will have heard something.
That would be nice. It's like, oh, the game's coming out in our lifetime. That's good to know. But yeah. I hope everything is good with you, man. I know you talked about on Twitter recently how things have been rough, so I hope everything's improving with you and your family lately.
Yeah, things are finally getting back on track.
That's good. Everyone should go follow him on Twitter and go follow his YouTube channel, and that's it for the show. Thank you very much.
Alrighty.
Have a good day. The AntiSocial Network is a Groupthink Productions podcast. Editing, producing, and hosting are by Tyler Hummel, artwork by Crystal Cowley, and original music was composed by Melissa Lafira and the late Dan Smolla. Like, subscribe, and please let us know what you think about the show in the comments below if you'd like to see anyone interesting be a guest on the show. Thank you for listening.